Today I want to talk about CSS or styling in a web. And yeah, my name is Andrey. I live in Vienna. I'm co-organizer of React Vienna, and I do have stickers. So if you want some cool stickers, grab some after the talk. With my friend, we created this app for picking colors from screen. For it's good stuff for web developers, not just for web developers. I work at Feedly as a UI engineer, and I would like to split my talk into 3 parts, kind of. And in the beginning, I would like to reflect a little bit on how did we get to this state of where we are right now. I would like to start with a brief history of CSS. How many people do know what this is? I just saw 2 hands, so yeah. Everyone is very young here. So yeah, CSS 1.0 was a thing at 1996. And the first browser to support it was Internet Explorer. And this is basically where we start speaking about cascading style sheets. It was the first basic implementation of it until 2004, where the CSS 2.1 working draft was basically released. So it wasn't finalized, but we started seeing stuff like basically from here to here we saw the rise of modern styling, this CSS3, because CSS3 was basically modularized in a way like ECMAScript right now, so they started working in modules, and, shipping new features much quickly. So we saw a project like CSS Garden that basically shows us how cool Cascade can be. Then we style our documents, and who knows what CSS Garden is? Quite a lot of hands, cool. So basically what we did is you got one single HTML page, and you could do anything but only in CSS. And all these examples, and there are like hundreds of them. If you go to CSS Garden today, you still can access any of these designs, and all of them are made on a single HTML page, semantic stuff, just with changes in CSS, which is amazing, I think. But that's the thing, yes. Yeah, so CSS was initially designed for documents. By the way, how many people here ever redesigned and relaunched the website by just CSS, by doing some CSS changes on it? Okay, 1, 2. Well, I was expecting 0. But yeah, and it was cool because it's a cool technology that allows us basically having the same markup. Semantic markup, what is more important, applying different styling for depending on different mediums, getting different designs out of it. At the same time, 1 year later, basically in 2005, interesting thing happened. It was later called Ajax, and it was basically the time when Google released Gmail and Google Maps, and these 2 basically first web apps ever defined how the web looks right now, or how it works basically. They started using this technology called Ajax XML HTTP request. It wasn't also kind of different browsers, different technologies, but in the end we have this concept of Ajax where it wasn't just server-client interaction anymore between that browser and server, but it was more complex, so we can click a button and new content could arrive. And it went to this today, so we have basically whole computers running just in a web browser. So we read news in web browser, and we even design other websites in web browser, which is mind-blowing in my opinion, which is amazing. But the thing is, CSS was designed for documents. And we still have this legacy with us after more than 20 years. And we have this thing called best practices. And sometimes best practices needs to be reviewed. And one of these practices called separation of concerns. It tells that we have JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, and we have to separate between these three things. But I think this is how, that should be called separation of technologies and not concerns, because to me, as a web developer, what I'm concerned about more is about these tiny elements. For example, checkbox, button, drop-down list, modal dialog, whatever. These are my concerns when I try to think about user interface. So in my opinion, this is a more appropriate way of addressing it. And as you can see, any of these things here can contain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And recently it got a name, it's called user interface components. And components in a nutshell is basically some tiny details, tiny pieces of UI, user interface, that encapsulate logic, markup, and presentation. So for each of these things, we have we might have some logic, some HTML associated, some styles. So let's look us to current time. A few years ago, we encountered interesting thing. It's called React. It was presented to the world in 2013. And it got some very mixed reactions. So it was like, yeah, it was a terrible idea, of course. But you know what? A couple of years later, we many people or many companies realized it wasn't that bad of an idea to put HTML into JavaScript. And you can see the trend going quite steep today. It's not the latest thing, so it's even higher right now. And many libraries, not just React, but many others adopted the approach that is basically, it's a very simple approach. It says everything is a component. So everything is encapsulated in one thing. And it makes things simple because now our UI can be represented in a simple function of state, which is cool because it's declarative and it's predictable. But what about styles? Yeah? So let's get back to our components. So we have these three things here. And G6 basically covers logic and HTML markup for this. And let's say we want to change the color of the button to be green. And the next thing happens that because we have global styles, something goes wrong. It might look like this because global CSS, because we have naming collisions. Because if we put our CSS into different files, but still still have this active class name, bad things will happen, right? And it's browser won't do anyhow. For us, it will just take the latest. And now we have to do this to be able to say, okay, but this button, it has its active state now. And in my experience, starting doing this, we'll go to this, and at some point it might look like this, which is not really, easy to understand. So when you grasp it, you can't. It's just like, oh, what happens here? And debugging this also might be hard. It might be really, really tricky. So it's like, what's going on? And I've been there so many times. It's like, and then I saw this, and it was like a real revelation. It was like, bam, what's bam, right? And it stands for block element modifier, and it's the technology was, it's not even technology, it's just a set of rules how you name your class names. And if you follow this thing, you solve this encapsulation / scoping problem. And it was developed by at Yandex. So the company who does lots of that. So it's like Russian Google. So they had this problem with how to build reusable components back in, I don't know, like 2004. So they started working on something that would help them to still like being able to reuse components, but theme them and like all the stuff they're still trying to figure out these days. So they come up with this, and this is how it looks like. So this is the code before them. So basically, you just prefix all your class names with this block name. It's called. It stays for B, so it's button. And now you can say that button dash _ active. It belongs to button. So you can just by looking at your HTML, you can see what's going on here. But the thing here, it requires lots of manual work. And refactoring such code may be very tedious task. So if you, let's say we want to refactor from going from nav block, we want to make it navigation to be more explicit. Just the div for HTML might look like this. And imagine doing this manually. It's kind of, just a lot of work. And as humans, we kind of, we know that we can automate stuff. This is where our friend JavaScript comes in, because with help of JavaScript, we can basically generate class names that will follow this pattern. So this is the same component with this BAM, and this is the CSS module. So as you can notice, we got the new import thing here, which I think is really big deal. And the second big deal here is that we're not having strings for addressing class names anymore. And why I think it's a big deal? Because right now, having these things here, this code starts to be traceable just like any other JavaScript in the application. So how does it work? This is how we would like our BAM CSS, button.css with BAM notation. And this is how we would do this in CSS module. So you can see it's less boilerplate, so we don't have to prefix all the class names. And the JavaScript that runs underneath, so it will run on build step. So it's not in runtime. It's happening before you deliver your CSS to the clients. It will just generate some class names that are unique. So that's the most important part of it. They are 100% unique, so you don't have to think about naming collisions and all this stuff. So basically, by using this model, you get BAM for free. But yeah, there are some drawbacks. So it's still like there is some non-standard syntax to be used, like compose, files, and stuff. So I don't want to go deeper into CSS modules. Everyone can check it out. So there is some special syntax to express, to make it more expressive. There's build step required. There's no dead code elimination and no automatic vendor prefixing. I still believe we have to prefix, at least for the sake of IE10. So just taking the flexbox, it still requires pretty much lots of but yeah, we will go away from this part sometime, but new features will arrive, so I don't think we can get around it yet. So yeah, but let's take one step further. Some people thought. So what would happen if we would combine CSS modules with JavaScript? And it's called, this one of the project, there are many attempts to do this. and it's called GSS. I designed the logo. This is why I'm presenting it here. But there are many attempts to do this. This is just one. And here you write styles using object notation in JavaScript. But I think this is also quite readable. It's easy to see what's going on. And the cool part of it, it almost looks like CSS modules. So it's like this is CSS modules, and this is GSS. So the only thing that changed is you have to do this wrapping this higher order function call that basically provides this classes thing to the components. It's not that much of refactoring here. But we get some benefits because now it's just W3C standard, ECMAScript, and by using ECMAScript, it's much easier to compose this stuff. So it's just basically object.assign, so we can merge objects, and we don't need the special syntax anymore. And also because GSS can also run in the browser, we can eliminate the build step. But if you want to extract CSS in a separate file, we still can use a build script and extract it. And also the nice things are the dead code will be eliminated automatically, as well as automatic vendor prefixing. And then interesting thing happened. A couple of guys thought, yeah, but if we generate class names, why do we still use class attribute? And this is the idea behind style components created by Max Stoeber and Glenn Mattern. So basically what they do is they say, yeah, we could just write CSS because it's more like people love the syntax, so we don't want to use object notation here. It was by design. And you basically just assign this attributes to this h1, which will generate h1 tag. And when you render it, you call it title. That will generate, that will produce h1 this attached styles. And this is how easy it is to make normal button and primary button, because now you can you have access to some attributes you pass to the button, this primary prop, and depending on this primary prop, you just change the value, and the framework just figures out how to deal with it. Yeah, so this will generate 2 class names. It's not like, and it will assign, basically assign to this class names depending on what props you pass here. So class names becoming implementation detail in this case, and removing this mapping between component and style, so you don't have to think about how do I attach my style. So if it's so basically you can get rid of writing imperative code, kind of. And this approach got some traction. And many other library authors started experimenting with it, and it became a thing like style primitives. And style primitives is cool because now, because the class name and all the styling is kind of implementation detail, you can use the same styles writing CSS in your JavaScript. You can use it in React Native, or you can render your styled stuff in Sketch directly. So basically, now you have 4 basic primitives that are interoperable between different platforms. You might be asking why would we need this? And let's get a sneak peek into the future. One of the applications for this stuff is universal rendering, of course. There have been some moments into this VR thing recently. So, for example, this is official React VR documentation, and it still uses object notation, this JavaScript here. But basically, having these primitives, we could implement this using CSS streams. And there's this project called React SketchUp that allows you to generate sketch mockups, sketch documents out of your code. The most interesting thing about it is, like, yeah, why would you need something like that? Is now you basically then you have your design system that you use in production. Now you can use the same views and like actual views in a sketch to be able to improve design workflow. So you don't have to, you know, let's say you have updated a active color for all your buttons, and all your sketch files became obsolete, right? So now you have to go through all of them and update them. And it's tedious work, so this kind of saves it. It's kind of, you know, drag and drop, and this is the actual component that will be rendered exactly the same in the browser, then it's done. So it's kind of design system shareable between designers and developers. Isn't it that cool? And I think it's really cool. It's something I would like to be using, and I think that's the future. But yeah, let's talk about some misconceptions I hear a lot about CSS and JS in general. First of all, of course, it's CSS and JS is slow. And where are people proving that CSS and JS is slower than vanilla CSS? By having doing some benchmarks. And let's get some things straight. First of all, CSS in JS doesn't equal its inline style. Common misconception. So, like, by using a CSS in JS library, it's not producing inline style. Not necessarily. There are some libraries that are doing that, but it's a minority, and you kind of, like, the community realized the drawbacks of doing that, and be all aware of that. That's actually was the reason I wasn't a believer in the beginning. I was also very skeptical about this because of inline styles and all this, like, how it affects their performance. But right now it's not the case anymore. So this is an example from a very popular library called Glenmore. It will just produce some unique class name the same way CSS modules would do. But as you can see, it's just JavaScript in this case, to use object notation. And the second thing is CSS in JS. I think it's fast enough. And there are examples of, like, for example, GSS uses very, very low-level APIs, DOM APIs called CSS OM, to inject style sheets into the page in runtime. So this thing runs. I don't have a video for it because my computer is slower than this thing running. So I can get 60 FPS out of my computer just by taking Spring this QuickTime. So I didn't make a video, but you can see it's it's a steady almost 60 FPS, like 58, 50 something on my Retina screen. And even like this many circles, so it's just randomly moving them. And to be honest, this is very specific example of like using it. Nobody in production will ever use such thing for, you know, so like we don't usually generate millions of styles just to animate something. So it's a different use case, but it just proves that performance isn't the bottleneck. And the third very important thing to me, I think that maintainability is much more important than speed and performance. Of course, it's like if performance is okay, it can be something that sucks. So it should be usable, but if we start thinking about like if it's 58 FPS or 60 FPS, I don't know. Yeah. So the thing is, many people don't understand the point of React or why React exists, and its point is to provide it as a way of creating a maintainable applications. It's not about being faster than something. Of course, vanilla JS will be faster, but it's also much harder to write. And it's kind of, it doesn't matter that much because all of the libraries we have right now are kind of fast enough, and the improving on performance every day. So like we're like all these projects are looking over our shoulder at another and saying like, oh, that's cool, it's a cool idea, I'll adopt it. So right now we're at the point where we're talking about like 1 millisecond difference to native vanilla React. So it's kind of, you can just forget about these numbers. Because to me, like doing stuff just in CSS, like treating CSS as a programming language, I don't know, because like this is an example, you can find it in this code pen. It just does this dynamic theming. It says it's CSS only, but it's obviously not. You still have to use some JavaScript to get this color picker to assign it to CSS variables. But I don't know, like I wouldn't want to maintain this kind of code in production because I don't think it's really maintainable or even readable. So it's really hard to read. It's really hard to understand what's going on here. And yeah, there's this thing. It's like crafted CSS is much better for performance because we just crafted it. We can be wrong. Just a couple of months, this research came out. It was analyzing top 200 most popular websites ever, and it says there's like 70% repetition of class names and CSS rules on this website. There's a kind of a solution to that. It's called like functional CSS. There's a library called, it's not library, it's just a set of class names, let's say. Let's put it like that. So it's a way of writing classes. So you can like it's it's not really readable thing. So it's kind of worst web idea of all time. It's a really bad one. And I kind of agree. It's not that good. It's like it's. You might get used to it, but it's like a lot of manual work. And as humans, we kind of learn that we can optimize some stuff and we apply some algorithms to it. There's a library called Styletron that does exactly that. So it's kind of because all of your styles now are traceable and analyzable, statically analyzable, because they are in JavaScript, right? You can analyze them at the build time and produce the minimum needed CSS with these atomic class names that nobody wants to read. And that's like the API of this library still looks almost the same as style components apart from this object notation that is also implementation though, because we can go back and forth because it's easy, it's just syntax difference. And the interesting part, he applied this library to this popular, so he took Airbnb.com CSS and basically redone it in different CSS and JS libraries and compared the sizes, and Styletron was able to produce like a half of a bundle of CSS just by using this single heuristic. And so like the solution is just don't write this functional, so you can just generate it, right? It's an algorithm. So it's kind of obviously who will win this war here. The second thing, the next thing is it's not real CSS, yeah. So it's something in between, but yeah, neither is Sass, less, or stylus, I think, but we still use it, we still love it because it empowers us. And again, Sass has variables, mixins, and all this stuff. Like it's really nice to use. I agree. I use Sass a lot. But you know what? JavaScript also has variables, functions that can be used as mixins. And the good news is that if you know Sass, there's this nice article. It's called "If You Know Sass, You Know ECMAScript," 2015. Because yeah, of course, like Sass has variables, so does JavaScript. Lists, here you go. It's called array. Iterating through lists, very similar. Functions, Nexon function, I don't know, like even this dot notation. So if you're familiar with SAS, you will be really at home, even this like programming stuff around CSS, even though you don't have to. And there's this library also created by Mike Schleber and other contributors, Nikraf as well, and it's called Polish. It's basically like Compass for CSS and JS libraries. But the cool thing about it is it's framework agnostic, so you can use it with any CSS and JS library because it's just functions that written in JavaScript that like helper functions. For example, working with colors, or yeah, this is just color example, but there are many. It's like Lodash for CSS. So there are like utility functions that are pure, immutable, so you always get the value out of it. So never mutates any values. And then there's this next argument. It's called you should use the platform. Platform is a good thing. But honestly, like we still need to support IE sometimes. Like my project, we still support IE 10, and really we got out of luck. So it's like Edge is also not quite where. So it's kind of, you know, like let's look at Shadow DOM. I don't know. Today we saw like beta support, but I'm still not sure because Safari says 11 won't get it. So we still need to polyfill this stuff, and some stuff we were asking for won't be implemented because it's I don't know, it's some problems. So it was withdrawn from the working group. So we will never get this thing. But you know, where's this Glam library that basically make Alex happy? Because the goal of creating this library, it was just an experiment. So it kind of does this real dynamic probes and apply. And it's kind of, it polyfills with like features we don't have yet, or we won't have, which is cool, I think. Or with style G6, the attempt to create kind of server renderable Shadow DOM styles, that is impossible right now, and I doubt it will be possible in the near future by using Shadow DOM. So you when you just use Shadow DOM, you can't pre-render your styles and inject it into the document. So you kind of rely on JavaScript until the JavaScript is evaluated and executed. So you kind of, you know, like always talk about performance. So you can pre-render it and ship it as a static thing, but this thing can, and it looks exactly the same as Shadow DOM would look like, besides this GS6 thing here. So it produces some ugliness, but who cares? It's compiler thing. We don't have to look at this. So it's kind of, it's future-proof because it's server renderable Shadow DOM. So when Shadow DOM arrives, we can just remove this JavaScript implementation out of it, and it'll just work. So we don't have to update anything in our code, which is the goal, I guess, for many developers. And also, like, CSS is simple argument. There's a cool article I recently read. Although I don't agree with the overall point of this article, it says that CSS simple doesn't mean that it's easy. And I agree to that because CSS it's huge. It's like so many things going on. I love CSS, but if you like start looking at selectors are easy. Some like basic stuff is easy, but if you start digging it, it's not. So it's not very complex, and that's the goal of CSS, to be approachable. But if you start like doing it at scale, you will probably hit this mistakenly simple, easy argument soon, and it will be, yeah, it will be bad for you. And for example, with simple, like how do you do critical CSS? How many of you doing critical CSS extraction? How many know how to do that? Not many hands, like single hand. Yeah, that's what I know, because it's two hands, yeah. Because it's hard to do, it's not really, it's really hard to do, and not many people know how to do that. And this is how easy it is to do with for example, style components have it out of the box. So basically, what you have to add is 2 lines of code, and these 2 lines will figure out what is critical CSS, like what components will be displayed on that page at the run, like at the beginning when you load it, and it will only include this needed CSS into this CSS thing. So you will be not over-delivering anything to the client at the initial loading. And now, like basically, this CSS you can now inject into your HTML document and ship it to the client. And I really like this code because it says if you build your app with progressive enhancement in mind, despite being written entirely in JavaScript, it might not require JavaScript in the client at all. And this is true. I also tried, I also built some apps that don't require JavaScript, at least for the initial loading, and then JavaScript arrives and starts enhancing. So it's like best of both worlds, but it uses the same code at the server and at the client, which is a win because we don't have to repeat this logic in 2 different languages or 2 different apps. I kind of realize you might be falling asleep right now. And sorry, Leah, but I have to bring this up because I don't think we are at the stage where we are crying for help or we want to, we don't want to change CSS. We think CSS is amazing, but there are some things how we treat CSS that doesn't fit our needs, and then we talk about scaling it, like when we talk about creating complex applications that run in that browser. And I think that CSS in GS trend just tries to enforce, to get this all the knowledge we have about the technology and put it into this, just to make it a program that can be run. So we consumer of the signal don't have to think about it because it just works. So to close it, I would like to say and repeat that it's still CSS and you still have to learn it, so there is no other way around it. But where do you put your CSS? I don't think it matters a lot. And if it's a file name, there's a CSS extension, or is it JavaScript extension? I don't think it matters a lot. Because it's not about how fast you can write code, it's about how fast you can read it. And any hint of where your CSS or styles coming from into your component is a help here. The third and last thing is just stay open-minded and keep experimenting, because I think the future is bright. And peace, love, this guy, unicorns, and thank you very much.